Welcome on to the next edition of Up. My name is Brad Nadalt. It is so good to have you with us here today. And on today's edition of the podcast, we are heading to the home of the Comrades Marathon. We're heading to Pietermaritzburg, to the race office, especially to catch up with the race director, Alain, Dalais, who joins us right now. Alain, nice to touch base once again. We spoke in the build-up to Comrades 2025 on one of the webinars, but one thing I love about these podcasts is we get to spend a little bit more time with you. I know we did do quite a long chat with you on that webinar, but this is a bit more informal and just a cool opportunity to catch up. You look like you've had some sleep since the last time I saw you, and just for clarity, the last time I saw you was on the finish line of Comrades 2025. You look like you've managed to catch up on some sleep, Alain. You're looking much less stressed, I can tell you that much.
Thanks for having me again on the podcast, Brad. Always great to be here. Yeah, definitely. When I saw you finishing your 11:59, and we had a nice chat after the finish line, I was totally exhausted by then. So yes, I have had some time to just catch up on some rest, etc. But yeah, all good in my world, and already busy with planning ahead, 2026 and 2027 planning.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about, lots to unpack. Obviously, there were some big changes in 2025. But Alain, I want to give people a sense of what your day is like on Comrades Race Day. Obviously, it doesn't start for you on race day either. I mean, for the runners, there's months and months of preparation and training. And for the race office, you've just alluded to it now. I mean, you're planning for 2027, which is 2 years away right now. So it never really ends for you guys and girls at the Comrades office too. But tell us a little bit about your day on Comrades Race Day itself. Talk me through, like, what do you sleep the night before like us, or are you up all night making sure everything's... Tell me a little bit about your day. Where are you? What goes down on Comrades Race Day for the race director?
So yeah, Brad, this year was obviously a lot busier for me in terms of my role and responsibility of the race. So effectively survived on minimal sleep for at least 6 months. I'm talking 3, maximum 4 hours a night for a very long period. So sleep deprivation is real when you're in this position, and even just, generally amongst the staff and our race organizing committee, it's very strenuous in terms of all our planning, organizing. But on race weekend, probably Friday, I think I had about probably 4 or 5 hours sleep. But Saturday, I had 2 hours sleep. So literally left the start or the Pietermaritzburg City Hall start area about 11:45, and I was back there about 2:10 in the morning. So yeah, just got home. The 2 hours felt like 5 minutes when my alarm went off. Got showered and dressed and ready for the day ahead, and went straight back to the start, where I teamed up with Johan, our start manager from the race organizing committee, and all his volunteers. Did all our various briefings with the technical officials, security officials, volunteers, etc. Then we did final quality control checks, checking all the seating, batch fencing, signage, toilets are all ready and unlocked and ready for use. Traffic authorities are in place. All the drop and go areas ready to receive runners. Tog bag trucks and facilities and staff are in place. Sound checks with the gear house and their crew, and then meeting up with our announcing team around 4 a.m. Also doing final run through and dry run with them. Then we did something new, as you know, and all your listeners, especially those Comrades participants, know that the 2 start was something brand new to all of us. There was some concerns, anxiety from all corners, because it is something new, especially for the Comrades marathon. But we did a final dry run. Just to note, we had done many dry runs because it was something new, in previous weeks, even the weekend before Comrades. But we did a final dry run with the firefighters from Cape Town and Pietermaritzburg, and as well as our volunteers. And basically then waiting for everything to start taking place. And the start really went very well. It was great. Yeah, and then as soon as the last runners I'd start off at 5 a.m. to personally sing off the wheelchair participants and the famous rope runner, Marissa Groenewald. So they left at 5 a.m. And then thereafter, I teamed up with the technical officials, etc., just making sure all our elite runners are ready and going into the city hall for their warm-ups, etc. And then, yeah, we were good to go thereafter. Once the start had gone off, I then followed in my vehicle. So between the last runner and the sweep teams that come up and pick up everything and clean the route, etc., I followed the last runners, especially down poly shorts, just to make sure it was incident free, etc. That went very well. Popped in ahead of the runners along the route, checking various areas, activations, refreshment stations all in place, etc. And then, yeah, back onto the N3 and straight to the finish, where my day at the finish officially began. And yeah, it was hectic busy from there until very late at night, even after the last runners had left the finish. So yeah, but it was a very busy day. So lots of challenges, especially in the late afternoon, as we're all aware, with congestion issues, etc. But other than that, all in all, a good day, a great day out. And I've got to experience Comrades, over 10 years now, like different venues, up run, down run. So yes, this venue did, or the setup at the finish did present us challenges, but as I say, all in all, overall, a good success this year again.
Yeah, Alain, it's amazing. I mean, we caught up on the finish line just by chance. So you happened to be there when I snuck in just before the gun went, and had a bit of a chat to you. And obviously, as runners, we then stumble home and try and get some rest. But it doesn't end for you there. I mean, it's not like you can pack up and go, you know what, we're done. I'm out of here at 6 o'clock when everyone's finished. You've got to break down the finish. So when did your Comrades finish? Like for you, when was it that you could go home and actually go and get 8 hours worth of sleep?
I walked into my house on Monday evening, 7 p.m. So wow. Yeah, because after the last runners left, we go around checking. We go to the medical tent, meet up with the team there, with our medical doctors, and just check on the last few runners that are there that may possibly need to either be discharged from medical or taken to hospital. Myself and some of our staff and volunteers then do a full check and walk around of the entire finish, checking in all the tents, in the toilets, etc., just to make sure, because we actually, every single year, we do this exercise. I personally like to do it, especially like an hour or two after the race, because you literally do find runners sleeping in the bush, curled up in a corner with their space blanket on. So, it's just become a habit of mine over the last few years that I like to do that. So I grab a team and we go do it together. And then we assist those runners to their feet or wake them up and assist them by giving them a lift somewhere. So those are things that happen behind the scenes. And this year, which was very unfortunate, we had the runner that went missing, Moira Harding. So yes, she had finished and she didn't go through our medical facility. She had got a medal, etc. And then, of course, her husband came to the finish. I think came to us specifically, myself and some of our team. I was near the VOC at the finish. I think it was just before 7 p.m. To inform us that she was missing and they couldn't locate her. I then mobilized the team. I obviously escalated it to SAPS and all the other safety and security role players. But then most of them had started leaving the venue. But I got a team together. Some of our Comrades staff, Sean Falconer was there with me as well. And we literally started looking, and even our acting chairperson on the day, Brenda Marlene, was with Sean and I as well, and some of our staff. And we literally looked in every single one of those hundreds and hundreds of portable toilets in the tents. I personally went up to as far as the rugby stadium where we had parking areas, etc. We looked every single place. And I think we eventually gave up our search at 20 to 1 in the morning because we literally just could not stand on our feet at that point. So we made our way to our various accommodation that we were all staying at. And of course, some of us had to be up early because we had the breakfast prize giving at 8 o'clock. So some of us went there, but the brigadier that was in charge of Comrades, Brigadier Saunders, and some of the senior personnel from SAPS and safety, etc., they then did a very detailed search. They started that search at 7 a.m. And that was very fruitful because they located Moira down in the Point area. So yeah, that was a very stressful race night for us, but yeah, still very happy and sure, it's such a blessing that she's fine and she's on the way to full recovery, etc. But yeah, and then breakfast prize giving took place. Post the prize giving breakfast, there's various interviews that the chairman of the board and myself have to do with the media, etc. We then have a if you want to call it a post-race mini debrief with the Comrades board and myself, and we also had an invited guest, Hilary Walker from the IAU, that was here, and she spent time with us, giving us her observations, etc. And by the time that was all complete, it was already around 2 p.m. I then went to do a final check, met up with Tonya, our Finnish venue manager, did a final check and touch base with her. And I then proceeded to get onto the Comrades route to check the entire route for leftover water sachets, leftover product, or anything, signage, etc., that may still be on the route. So I took a nice slow drive all the way to Pietermaritzburg on the route, and eventually, as I say, walked in the house at probably close to 7 p.m.
That's amazing. And the reason I wanted to have this chat was to give people an idea of what you go through as race director. Like, I mean, it's Comrades as an event is incredible. I mean, it's like the logistics. I can't even imagine the amount of logistics that go into something like Comrades. And I think just hearing from your perspective, obviously we as runners have a pretty hard day running, but it is hard for you in a different way. And for your team, it's not just you. You also aren't on your own. You've got a whole team behind you that make this possible. You spoke about the start and then obviously the finish venue. I spoke to Rory Steyn, one of the board members on this podcast just a couple of weeks ago. And obviously, I mean, I got his take on the start and finish. And there were lots of changes and big changes at Comrades this year. And there's obviously some sort of working and planning towards 2027, which is the 100th running. But what are some of the key takeaways? I mean, you mentioned the start was good. It wasn't without issues. I think we have to be honest. There were one or two issues, and they're always going to be with a race the magnitude of Comrades. You're never going to have everything 100% perfect. It doesn't matter how much you prep, plan. There's always, because you're dealing with human beings, there are always going to be things that go wrong. But what are some of the sort of takeaways now that the dust has settled for you and your team from the start and the finish? Like, what are some of the things that you think need to be improved on for the next edition, and particularly the next down? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah. So Brad, yeah, you spot on there. I love the way you said that, because that's my personal philosophy. I tell everyone at Comrades House, in all our meetings, our board members, etc., that if you have a perfect event, then you need to really triple check everything. There is no way that an event the magnitude of Comrades can be 100%. It's virtually impossible. As you say, you got a massive human element involved, and you, as whether it be myself as a senior person in charge, or some of our board or some of our portfolio managers, you cannot be everywhere at every single moment of the day, especially once the race is now live and on. So it's impossible to be everywhere. It's impossible to try and manage everything or make sure that everything goes smoothly, because there's just things that are out, beyond your control. So definitely the start, as I say, for something new, especially a two-start, as I mentioned earlier, it did go very well. It went as I expected to be, because I knew that resources like the Cape Town firemen who do the Two Ocean starts, those, and of course having scheduling dry runs beforehand, so we got a sort of a taste of what to expect, etc. But of course, there's things that you cannot foresee. Like we did not know if the runners are going to be well disciplined and not fence jump and shove each other like what happened in 2023's down run start. But we mentioned in our media release post the race that, and I continue to say thank you to the runners, that 2025 participants, for the generally great or good behavior that they had at the start, without pushing, shoving, pushing down fences, etc. That was really good to see, and I hope that continues every year for the starts, whether up run or down run. But Brad, with the start, there were some challenges, but really nothing major as far as, for example, safety or security is concerned. It's mostly minor logistical matters, things like we realized we could put up larger signage, for example. We did do new signage this year that was provided by one of our sponsors, but some of the signage wasn't double-sided. No, it's minor things like that, but it can make a difference in terms of assisting runners to get smoothly into their batches, etc. And even making sure the signage is much higher and visible from all angles. But again, easy fixes, but it is stuff that we have taken note of. Even in terms of something like the drop-off zone, we feel was much better than previous years. But again, still room for improvement. I've identified that we need to, for the down run start, definitely look at dedicated areas, particularly for buses, to drop runners off, as opposed to coming in where runners would get dropped off with their cars or by the family or clubmates, etc. Have a separate section on Boshoff Street where buses can do a drop-off, have security and marshals there to guide the runners to make their way to the start area. And then those buses can leave the precinct. So look, there's a few more, but I mean, those are some of the main ones. Look, the one about the cannon that some runners are talking about on social media, that again, literally one of those freak incidents that, again, beyond our control. We were literally 30 minutes before the start of Group 1, and the poor official from the SA Navy just burst into tears. And when Johan and I went to go speak to her, the pin on the cannon broke. So, there again, the runners, public, nobody knows those kind of things are happening behind the scenes. I run across up the stairs to the top of the portico with the mayor, etc., or talking to the DJs, trying to locate a cannon recording sound as a backup. We eventually found one, but it was too late to get it into the sequence for Group 1. Hence why you see some runners commenting that they heard the gun, and obviously some saw the mayor and the smoke, etc. And of course, all the traditions had already been completed, but they weren't sure now, do we set our watches? So, which is understandable. But then we had the recording ready for Group 2. And that's why when Group 2 moved to the start line, they had a cannon sound that came through on the speakers. Another observation we made is that we did add extra speaker towers in, but it would be good to have them literally in line with the very last runner in this year was Group S, but the very last runner in the seeding batches, so that they really feel even more so part of the whole vibe and the Gees and the Comrades traditions. So those are some of the main sort of take homes. As I said, there are some other minor ones here and there, but those certainly will be tweaking and making sure that those are sorted for the next down run. Look at the finish. So the street finish, again, something totally new to Comrades, especially in modern times, because it was used in the early days when Comrades was founded. But again, you had 34 runners, 40 runners, not 20,000 runners, for example. But look, the street finish worked well for most part of the day. But as we all know, the bulk of the field finishes in that last 2 hours. So when we did have those huge numbers of runners completing the race, and with that comes all their spectators that now have been following them along the day, along the route, and making their way to the finish. And the problem we actually had was not per se by the runners, it was actually from the spectator side of things, because the spectators flooded the runners' exit area. And as runners had completed the race, got their medals, proceeded out of that area after getting the refreshments, etc., they were then met with this bottleneck of spectators. They were waiting for their runners to finish and meet up, etc. So lots of learnings from that. We definitely need to up our uniformed security presence and get much larger stature guards, etc. Something that we also became aware after we looked into it in more detail now in this post-Comrades period, we actually did have an adequate fencing, high fencing, almost 2-meter high fencing along that whole runner's exit. And it was a dedicated runner-only zone. So where the congestion area was, runners were meant to come out and do that small left hairpin into People's Park. That was not meant to be full of spectators. But it was established when myself, Tanya, and a few other officials walked the same route the runner would go. In other words, over the finish line, through the medals tent, past the refreshments. When we got to that bottleneck, we realized spectators or the general public removed our fencing and threw it to one side on the road. Again, you asked the question, where was security when that happened? But it's part of our various debrief meetings we're having our security providers, just to establish now, what went wrong there. But again, key learnings from that, something I've been looking at, which I've seen even at some of the international races. I know a lot of the London Marathon does it very well, where you allocate a lot more space for the finish areas. So where the runners have completed, got their medal, you allocate lots and lots, like I'm talking hundreds of meters of more space, where it's a runners only zone. Move the talk bag area into that zone, keep the refreshments there, etc. But have areas where runners can just literally gather themselves, gather their emotions, and catch their breath effectively before they actually meet up with their supporters or make their way to their car or whatever it is. So yeah, you have much more space for that. Bring medical a lot closer as well. That would certainly help. And then once runners have gotten through that, again, as I say, like London Marathon is a very good example, because with them, you get through that area, then you go to dedicated meetup points, as they call it. And those meetup points are based on the first letter of your surname. So, if it's A to C in a certain street and D to F in another street, for example, you have big, large signage, massive fonts, etc., with much more lighting than even we had this year. Because, a lot of people are saying it wasn't adequate lighting. There was lighting, but it could have been better. But yeah, we literally try and you need to make it almost like daylight, especially those meetup points. Make sure there's sufficient security personnel and marshals to ensure there's no pickpocketing and other issues there. But if you have those dedicated meetup points, you're channeling the general public away from the runner-only areas. And of course, as I say, giving the runners more space to get to their families and then get out of the precinct much safer, quicker. Look, the challenge we have here in KZN, especially Maritzburg and Durban, is our traffic egress, etc., after Comrades. I don't know, we're looking at with the traffic authorities what more we can do, but it's always going to be a challenge. These roads were not designed. If you look at Pietermaritzburg as an example, these roads were not designed to cater for that many cars in such a small window period. And then after the race, the sort of the Scottsville area around the Scottsville racecourse, where we traditionally have the uprun, sort of gets quieter. But then when you hop onto the N3, where there's still roadworks taking place, then you see the chaotic traffic situation. So there's some factors that, unfortunately, until these roadworks are concluded, which is still a couple of years to go, we're going to have those kind of traffic congestion issues, etc. But certainly at the finish, as I say, lots of learning curves there. I know a lot of runners are asking to go back to a stadium environment, but something we need to sort of, at a CMA, we need to also keep reminding runners is that we have been listening to runners, even more so this year especially, but even over the last few years, even under previous managers at Comrades. We had Rowan previously, we had Anne last year, and we have been listening to the runners in terms of the finish setup and layout. Last year at Scottsville, there were complaints about the bridges causing congestion for people to go over, which they did. Same in 2023 at Kingsmead. Runners were complaining about having to run and still walk over bridges. Now, Moses Mabhida in 2018, 2022, the massive complaint, which is fully understandable, and I agree with this 100%, having to walk up 84 steps after running 90 Ks is a no-no. So again, that didn't work for us. I still feel Kingsmead is an awesome venue, but that would mean you need to reduce your numbers in. Because certainly at the numbers we had this year, 24,000, or even, the rumor mill has been busy over the last year or so about talking about, people ask us, is there going to be 30,000 or 34,000 runners? Certainly with the way roadworks are now, the finish venues we have as options, we certainly cannot look at those kind of numbers. We would, myself and our team and the board are currently looking into that very, very closely to see what would be the safest number. And I'm using the word safe because safety is still number one priority. Safety of runners, safety of spectators, general public must always be number one priority. And nothing else should actually dictate, like, you shouldn't, things like budget or whatever should not dictate our numbers. It should only be dictated by safety and secondly, the runner experience. So,
yeah. Alain, you bring up a very important point, and I said this to Rory Stain as well, is that bigger is not always better. And some of the things that make Comrades so special is obviously the traditions, and there's lots of history around Comrades, and I think that's one thing that attracts people to this race, and the legacy of that history. And when you do try and go too big, you have to compromise on things. And unfortunately, for some of the for the race to get as big as a lot of people are saying it needs to get, you have to then compromise on those. And this is my personal opinion, and I know lots of people agree with me, but I know lots of people disagree with me too, and that's cool. But when you move away from the things that make Comrades special, it no longer makes Comrades special. There's lots of other races around the world. And that's the danger. You've got to get that balance right between sort of progress and growth versus keeping those traditional things. And maybe there is a number. Maybe this year was too big. Maybe it's 18,000. I don't know what that number is. And that's what it is. And what that is going to mean is some people will miss out because there will always be more demand than there is availability. And I used London Marathon as an example in my chat with Rory, that this year they had 1.1 million applications for the ballot to get into London, and they only had 20,000 ballot spots. Obviously, they have 50,000 people run the race, but there's good for age and all of that sort of stuff. But only 20,000 ballot spots for 1.1 million runners. And London's a bit bigger than Pietermaritzburg, that's for sure. And if they can only handle that amount, like Maritzburg, I love Maritzburg, but it's called Sleepy Hollow for a reason. There's not much that happens in Pietermaritzburg. So that is one of the challenges. And that's something that you guys as a race organizing committee and the Comrades board have to deal with and make compromises on both sides. So, yeah, it's a very difficult balancing act. I'm glad I'm not you guys, but I think a lot of people don't take that into account around a race like Comrades. And this race is steeped in traditions. And if we lose those traditions, we lose the essence of this race.
100% spot on. We cannot lose those kind of traditions. It's important as Comrades, and I think our new board is very they're pushing this hard, but they're very good at it as well, in terms of their vision and foresight into the future. And myself and the board, where we all really align very well is that we have to move with the times. We have to move with new technology, new innovations, because that's only going to make the race better and better. But you said it very well just now, Brad, is that Comrades cannot lose some of those very, very critically important traditions. You take away those traditions, it's not Comrades. It's a normal ultramarathon that takes place between two cities. We cannot lose that essence and that spirit of Comrades in terms of the event that we put on and that we host. So very, very delicate balancing act. But yeah, I have some ideas. I know because I've got to experience Comrades with different numbers at up run and down run. So I have lots of feedback for the board at our next meeting, but also currently busy with lots and lots of debrief meetings myself with our race organizing committee, with every single portfolio manager, with all our sponsors, etc., service providers like your security guys, etc. So getting all that feedback together, and we'll be presenting my final report of this year's race to the board at the end of July. We did actually have a board meeting last night where I presented a preliminary report, which covers quite a lot of aspects, even some that I've mentioned now. But, going forward, then I'll be putting through recommendations that come from a collective discussion, etc., in terms of what we feel that magic number is in terms of runner field. And of course, how we could maybe, use the example of London Marathon with the ballot system, but we could look at various options that we could maybe try, where you do specific allocations according to whether it be for Green Number Club, for novices, for etc., just to try and also, again, another balancing act to not just maybe follow our traditional way of putting it all on the system and say, go for it, first come, first serve, free fall, and then we fill up in like 2 days or whatever. So we need to just be a little bit more strategic on that, which I think we are going to do. And of course, whatever decision we make and that is made by the board, we will be communicating that very soon to the running community. But yeah, just important to find that magic number, and of course, really, really look in depth, in much more detail in terms of our layouts, specifically the finish layouts, and just make sure that people movement takes like really, really top priority from a safety and security aspect. And then I think, all our other minor tweaks in terms of various logistics, and then 2026 uprun should be a fantastic event. Again, another big one, as I mentioned earlier, we need to really look in depth into the whole traffic management aspect as well. But yeah, so this year, I mentioned on another podcast I was on the other day, Brad, is that we find ourselves in a very challenging situation, but good challenge this year is that usually we focus our energy, resources, time, etc., on the next year's race. So, in this case being 2026. However, we've in the situation now where we can't wait to still plan 2027. We're taking the key learnings from this year that are going to be tweaked for 2027.
Yeah.
But it's things like, again, looking at the route, looking at what our field's going to be, looking at the entry process, the finish, particularly around 2027. And we need to, as the CMA, come up with lots of exciting things, because it needs to be almost a Comrades festival, if you want to call it, festival of running for that 100th running, not just the race itself. Look at all sorts of other activities, from the expo to en route, at the start, at the finish. There's been suggestions that are coming in from the running community of, do we follow almost like what some other events, Oceans being one of them, and many others across the world and even in our country, where you have, for example, a 5 and a 10K on the Saturday. As a once-off, we did it during the lockdown, the pandemic, with Comrades as well, with the virtual run. But you have those shorter distances so that other people don't feel left out and can still get some medal that has a Comrades Hermes on it, etc. So there's all those kind of ideas and input we're getting from the running community, which is fantastic. But we certainly have to go like shoot for the stars kind of thing with the 100th running. It's going to be the only opportunity we all have. And when I say we, I'm talking about everyone, the runners, the entire running community, our general public, all our communities. Everyone needs to just get involved and be part of that whole experience in 2027.
Well, if you can flatten some of the hills for us, it'll certainly be helpful. I know you've got it up. Before I go, a quick one, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. Is there any news on the dates of 2026? I know there's lots of talk about the first weekend of June, second weekend of June. Can you shed any light on that?
So we are just awaiting confirmation from the Athletics Federations, Brad. But Comrades has not, especially for 2026, has not changed our traditional schedule or fixture in terms of being the second Sunday of June. So that being Sunday, 14 June 2026. But as I say, waiting final confirmation from the federations, and that should come through in the next coming days. And then we will be putting something out via our various marketing channels to inform the running community as to some of these dates, being 2026 race date, entry opening date for this year, the race launch date, obviously entry closing date, etc. So we are planning to get that information out much earlier than in previous years. My aim is to get that out hopefully within the next week or two to the runners.
Awesome. Alain, as always, I appreciate your time. I know you are super, super busy with all the debriefs and planning the next two, but we do appreciate your time. Thank you for making yourself available, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks for having me, Brad. Always great to be here with you guys. Keep well.